Alright, this is Gavin F. Haley with the Apex Guitar Institute. What string gauge should you be running on your guitar? Silly question, glad you asked. So let me preface this by saying that nobody can give you a hard and fast string gauge rule. Why is that? Because my hands aren't your hands and our hands aren't somebody else's hands. That's to say, if you take two people who may have vastly different physiologies, the same string gauge may not operate the same way. So then, a better question to ask is, what is the goal that I should be striving for when selecting a string gauge? So imagine we have a spectrum here. On one side, you have the stability of the strings. On the other side, you have the ease of playability. Thicker strings are going to be a lot more stable, but they're going to be a lot harder to do things like bends and vibrato on. And on the other side, the thinner the string, the easier it's going to be to do specific techniques, but you're going to lose out on stability. It becomes a lot easier to overpress that string, and you can actually bend it out of tune just by fretting too hard. And that balance is what you should be looking to strive for whenever you're selecting your strings. You want them to be thin enough to where they're easy to get these bends and vibrato, maybe up to a hole or a hole in another half step bend, but you don't want to go so thin that you inadvertently introduce new issues into your playing. You don't want those strings to be so sensitive that they react in a way that's beyond your ability to control. You might just not have the finesse to keep them where they're supposed to be. I myself tend toward the lighter side. I usually run around 10s or so in standard tuning. And what you'll likely find is that as you become a better player and you gain some of those more fine motor movements that allow you to keep control of the strings, you'll likely tend toward the lighter gauge as well, just because they're a lot easier to play, and harkening back to a few episodes ago, makes it to where you minimize the tension by a large factor. Now there are obviously going to be some exceptions to this, something like down tuning your guitar, maybe going to D standard. But here's the thing, whenever you're down tuning, you're just lessening tension, so you can thicken up the strings to compensate for that, and you'll likely find a gauge in D standard that feels similar to a gauge you like to use in E standard. That's why I like this question a lot more, is because it gives you a goal to target rather than just giving you a hard and fast rule on what strings you should use, which will differ depending on the application. So I hope this video helps, gives you something to look for whenever you're going to grab your next pack of strings. And until next time, play loud, be heard, and I'll see you on the next one.